Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I'm an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. Make sure to check in the description notes below the video where you will find links to all of my online shenanigans, including how to get my patterns to knit up for yourself, how to join the Watch Barbara Knit Facebook group, how to get my merchandise, and support me on Patreon. This is the third highlight video from December's YouTube Live. It was our first YouTube Live and we had a lot of fun, but we talked for well over an hour. So what I've done is made these highlight reels, videos, whatever you want to call them, where I sussed out a couple different categories that questions could be loosely put into and made smaller videos so that they are easier to watch, because I tend to make 15 to 20 minute videos. This final highlight video is questions that were asked by, or the subject matter is really good for beginning knitters, people who are just getting started knitting. Of course, it's probably good information for just about anybody, but specifically some of the questions were asked by beginning knitters, and I felt that they fit well into this particular category. I just want to mention that I am planning on continuing to do these YouTube lives. It was a lot of fun. I wanted to have a schedule, so my plan is the last Thursday of every month will be YouTube Live at 7 p.m. Eastern time, because that is my time zone. So put that on your schedule, watch for the thing to pop up. There'll be a placeholder thumbnail and you can click let me know when this happens. Put it in your phone, however you need to remember, but I would love to have you come join us and maybe ask some questions of your own. So I hope you enjoy these highlights about fun things for beginners. Does anyone have any questions for me regarding knitting or designing or anything? As I said in my previous, I reserve the right to take the Fifth Amendment if it's just not something I'm comfortable about putting online for posterity. But I would love to answer some questions. What size of yarn and type of fiber should a beginner use first? A yarn that you want to knit with, a yarn that you enjoy knitting with, and a yarn that you want to have a finished product in that yarn. Don't just buy a cheap placeholder yarn because you're a beginner, okay? Is what I'm gonna say to that. Usually you want to, okay, I'm trying to scroll back. Usually you're wanting to start with like a medium weight yarn, so something in the sport DK worsted is usually what we like to start people with, because big yarns have their own idiosyncrasies and lace and fingering weight tend to intimidate people. But if what you really want is knit socks, then start out knitting socks. There's no rule saying that because you're new, you have to use undesirable yarn. And I'm not going to say cheap yarn, because cheap yarn is sometimes the yarn you want, or inexpensive yarn is sometimes the yarn you want. But the yarn you want to start with is something that you really actually want the end product. Because if you're not motivated to finish it, you're not gonna put the time and effort into it. That said, you probably want to avoid really slippery yarns. You like tencels and things like that are going to make things more challenging, and really textured yarns like a mohair or something that is more challenging yarn to knit with. But use nice yarn that you're enjoying. Oh, I'm so glad you enjoy the videos. And yes, patterns can be difficult. One thing I will say about patterns is when you find a designer that their pattern writing style meshes with your learning and comprehension style, you might want to just, instead of skipping around and trying I encourage you to try different designers, but some of them, it's not that they're bad pattern writers, it's just that your method of understanding and learning doesn't match with their instructional style, because that's what a pattern really is. It's the designer teaching you how to knit a pattern. So just because you can't follow a pattern doesn't mean that you're not good at patterns. It might just be that style doesn't work with you. And just because a designer's style doesn't make a lot of sense to you doesn't mean they're a bad pattern writer. It's just not a good match. So find designers that match with your style, if that makes sense. Yarns to use for hot weather. So linen, silk, wool, cotton, and those kind of blends. And really, you're going to have your best success. Okay, the question was good advice on yarns to use for hot weather. Your plant fibers are going to be the most breathable and thinner weight yarns, but you're going to have your most success if you look for patterns that are designed to use that yarn. You cannot necessarily substitute a plant fiber yarn directly into a pattern designed for like a regular wool, because a good designer designs to the strengths and taking into consideration the properties of that yarn. So like 100% wool is kind of grabby and holds its shape well, whereas cotton isn't grabby and doesn't hold its shape well. So taking cotton and putting it into something like that may not be your most successful. That's actually, and fibers like that is one of the things I spend well over an hour talking about in my blocking class, is understanding different fibers. And I know y'all have asked for videos on different fibers, but there's just so much to convey about fibers, which is why I teach a class in it. Why do you use the Continental style versus English? Because it's what worked for me. I tried to knit English and I cannot tension the yarn in my right hand to save my life. If you watch some of my videos, you'll see them where I'll demo with Continental and I'm like, okay, y'all, I'm going to do it with my right hand. Feel free to make fun of me, because it's just, I can't get the rhythm of throwing or flicking or doing whatever with my right hand. It's just what worked for me. I tried doing English, and the first time I tried to learn to knit, I tried doing English and I just could not get it. And I gave up knitting. And then like 5 years later, I tried it again. So Continental, I think one of the reasons why Continental worked better for me is because I learned how to crochet when I was like 8 years old. And although I never became a very good crocheter, I tensioned the yarn in my left hand, and that did help. Another really good thing for your hands, Jenna, are the lotion bars. There are lotion bars that you can get that are specifically designed for knitters, where they're beeswax and other things, and you rub them into your hand and it dissolves entirely into your hands and it won't leave any residue on your knitting. And that is a consideration. So I didn't see your original question, Stacy, but yes, you might want to look into the specific knitter lotion bars. I'm trying, there was one I had that had a bee on it. Love and Leche. So the name of, let me look up. Love and Leche is the one I've used. Again, not getting any kickback on this or anything. They don't know me from Adam. I have personally used the Love and Leche lotion bars, and they're very, very nice. They come in that tin. You can carry them in your bag. Tell them I sent you. Maybe they'll come find me. If you only have the budget for either a Swift or a winder, get a Swift. A Swift is a better investment if you're going to have to buy them one at a time, because a ball winder isn't particularly useful without a Swift, but you can always hand wind off of a Swift. So the Swift is the thing that holds the yarn. And they're all different kinds of Swifts. And actually the comments on that video were really great. And people came up. One person said they've taken canned vegetables and put them at four corners and put on their table and put yarn around them. There's so many ways to hold a skein of yarn to hand wind it up. Hello, Tracy. I have a baby blanket that I started at the end. The end is curling with the garter I did. Instead of ripping back yet again, can I add more garter to the bottom, or what would be better? The first question I would ask you, Tracy, is have you blocked it yet? Because if it has garter on the bottom and you followed, like if that's the amount of garter the pattern said to use, blocking it might solve your problem if it's just gently flipping up. If you have blocked it and it's still curling, then adding more garter may help. It's definitely something I would try before I tried ripping back. Oh, it's acrylic, Tracy. So at that point, you can block acrylic, and steam heat blocking it may solve your problem. You should still block it. Now, when you steam heat block acrylic, you get one shot. So before I went backwards and before I frogged or did anything, I would, if you have extra yarn, knit a swatch and like knit a little bit, like a little chunk, like a small version, and with the garter on it, and then practice steam heat blocking that, because it definitely, I made a little teddy bear sweater for a charity thing, and it was in acrylic, and it was stockinette, it had a little garter hem, and the garter hem was flipped up. And when I used steam and heat on it, I held it over it and I just sat there and watched it lay down. So you still can block acrylic. You need to use steam and heat. I use a handheld steamer. You can use a steam iron, but what you need to do is do not, under any circumstances, touch the iron to your yarn, because it is plastic. It will melt. It will ruin your work and it will ruin your iron. There are people who will tell you to put a wet towel over it and then physically iron it. I do not recommend that, because that compresses and really changes the behavior of the yarn. So what you have to do is have it cranked up high for the steam heat and hold it over like by about 1/2 inch and just push the steam button and hover and move around and hover. So if that helps. Washing and blocking hats. I just made a bulky weight hat and just washed it and laid it flat to dry, but I think it got stretched out. Any tips for keeping a hat shape? This is a little tidbit from my blocking class that is one of the big surprises, but I'm going to let it out of the bag. Balloons. Block with balloons. That is how I pretty much block all of my hats. You take a balloon, when it's damp, you put the hat, here, I got a hat right here. So you put the hat on a flat surface and it's damp and it's open like this, like it's a bag, and you blow up the balloon partially, put it in here, and then flip it upside down so the balloon is supporting it. And then you blow up the balloon more until it just stretches it to the extent that you want it stretched. Okay. And then you just I sit it on a cup and it just dries like that. And you definitely don't want to stretch out your ribbing, because the ribbing is what keeps it on your head. Your pumpkin head needs the ribbing. So my number one tip for blocking hats is balloons. So there you go. First time shawl person. Honestly, if it's your very first shawl, you might want to try one of my small shawl videos. You can find them on the YouTube channel. There are several different shapes. Pick out a shape you like and just go for it. I have triangle, I have side to side asymmetrical, I have crescent shape. Just look at those. Actually, if you go to my content and sort it by the number of views, it is the number one most viewed pattern, the easy crescent shaped shawl. And it is a very straightforward pattern. And there are several other ones. There's a curved asymmetrical one, there's a crescent shaped lace one, and it might be a really good way to just get your first shawl under your belt. If you want to go with a written pattern, see, I need to design a really beginner shawl. Beginner is not really what I am known for. I'm not trying to be difficult. I am drawn to more complex stitches and techniques, and that's what I tend to design. Oh, the easy heart-shaped shawl. Actually, I can't believe I'm doing this. So my brand new shawl, 2 sizes too small, or would you, could you, either of those would work really, really well. Okay, and that is a Ravelry link. So if you don't do Ravelry, don't click on that link. So that is 2 sizes too small, and that is a really it has one fancy stitch that's one of the increases, and this is Would You Could You, which has slightly more fancy stitches, but it doesn't have any fancy increases. You liked Rosemary, you liked I think Argyroneta is actually a really straightforward shawl. The setup for it, that lace setup, is a little bit fiddly, but once you get into it, it's like a 2-row repeat and you just go. So thank you. I'm so glad you enjoyed Argyroneta. That I really like that shawl, and I'm particularly partial to it because that photo shoot was so fun. The lady, that lovely, lovely lady in the photo shoot modeling Argyroneta is my mom, and we had a ton of fun with that. Yeah, you know what? Yes, a lot of people don't like the triangular shawl because they say it's a butt arrow. Okay, they say it's pointing at your butt, and I totally understand that, and that's totally cool. I like crescent shapes. I like asymmetrical. I really like the 3/4 square, which is essentially 3 little triangles next to each other. Those are really, really great. Thank you for making this so much fun for me, and for being so amazing and understanding with me. And while I'm learning how to do this, it's probably always going to be a little bit chaotic.